How could a community be built and ran at sea? On this episode of the Colonize the Ocean podcast, we talk with Tony Olsen of Freedomhaven, a seasteading project which brings a city to the sea. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendan Traxler.
Okay, guys, welcome to Season 2 of the... Oh, sorry, you didn't want to do the episode thing, did you?
It's fine.
Okay, sorry, take two. Welcome to another episode of Colonize the Ocean podcast. My name is Adam Jewell, and with me, as always, is my handsome, much more bearded friend, Brendan Traxler. Brendan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
And with us today, and we've kind of talked in the past about how we were going to start getting more guests on. So today we have Tony Olsen with us. Tony is with Freedomhaven, and you guys can check that out at freedomhaven.org. Freedomhaven is an open design, low-cost, socioeconomic freedom seasteading project in international waters which seeks to be the most affordable seasteading solution to date, with a goal of having square footage of open sea safe light living space at $316 square foot, paid as a 5-year lease. Tony, that was kind of a big intro, but thank you for coming with us. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So tell us, we kind of just gave the quick version of your project, but tell us a little bit more about this project, how you came to get started with it and what it's all about.
Well, I have spent the course of my life, when I was a young adult and as a child, I spent a total of 6.5 years in Germany and toured Europe and came to understand after the fact why freedom was important and why I actually was why freedom is something to be sought for. I saw the difference in how different countries that have freedom prosper and don't have freedom don't prosper, especially like between East Germany and West Germany, because I was in both. And these are the same family members, the same genetics, the same people. And yet in East Germany, they quite literally were like sucked of life. I mean, they were like half zombified is the best way to describe them.
Right.
And it was very eye-opening for me. And it wasn't until later I realized that that's because they lived under socialism for so long. It really just destroyed them, not only economically, but also spiritually, emotionally, as individuals. So I've always wanted to have a future with more freedom in it. And I've studied economics for decades. But recently I've become interested in two different subjects. One was the tiny house movement. I just find it fascinating how you can fit so much livable space in such a small area. And at the same time, I was also fascinated with the whole shipping industry and how shipping containers just revolutionized the shipping industry. And then one day I was talking to a friend of mine, Nathan, and we were like, wait a second, why can't you combine these two together? And these mega container ships, what would happen if you were to convert one of those things and make the containers into tiny homes and actually make a floating apartment complex? And there are a lot of things that wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to actually buy a shipping container and convert it because you wouldn't have enough space for people to walk by. I mean, they're meant for like 1 or 2 people walking on a gantry plank, and not like an entire population. And you're missing septic systems, and it's meant to. Mega container ships are meant to house 100 people at the most, not thousands of people. So, but we can still take the general idea and work with it. And that's kind of how we started about 3 years ago.
Very cool. Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I am fascinated with the tiny home movement and shipping container movement. And I just both those things. I watch way too much content on tiny homes on YouTube and stuff like that. It's almost a bad obsession of mine there. But yeah, so it's very cool that's. And what I also think is interesting is here you are from Iowa, nice landlocked area, and I'm from Illinois. originally. So in Adams in South Dakota. So I mean, all these, yeah. I picked up everything, moved to Mississippi to be a little bit closer to the ocean, but still, yeah, it's. And we had last season we had some from Michigan as well that we were talking to. So I mean, it's
now I'm spaced on a name. Yeah.
Yeah. Because all these landlocked people are the ones that are really coming up with some of these ideas and doing stuff too. So that's kind of cool. I guess then how did that all correlate with you getting associated with the whole seasteading movement? I guess.
Well, we started working on this project before we even realized there was a seasteading movement, and it was just kind of fascinating that as we were working on this, wow, we found these people and found that group. There's a whole seasteading community out there, and it was amazing, you know.
Yeah.
We created a group online and just kind of gathered our friends that have been talking about it online, and from there it just kind of grew. We have about 300 and some odd, 320, 310, who knows, it changes every day. People on our main Facebook group, and we have a side one, a sister group that talks just about the politics, the government, how the rules and laws and role playing. It's called Freedomhaven role playing. How would it play out if the U.S. sent its Navy to do this, or if this person was accused of this kind of crime, or just role playing all these different scenarios, and we've been learning a lot from that. Changing.
Yeah, and you do a weekly Zoom call, is that correct?
Bi-weekly, yeah.
Okay, and so what?
Semi-weekly.
Yeah. So what's all involved with that? What do you guys talk about on there?
I just whatever subjects come up. This time we'll probably be, our next meeting is actually tomorrow, and we'll be probably it's whatever people want to talk about, ranging anywhere from the designs, how it would handle big waves. When the seas are calm and everything's gentle, that's perfect. But when the storms come, you have that once every 10-year storm, how we'll handle that. That's really what we've been focusing on. That we did some cost estimates recently of how much how this would be broken down, what kind of designs we can do that would get the cheapest amount of price and the greatest stability as soon as possible. Just whatever subjects come up, ideas people have. We've recently enhanced the website. Now it's gone from pathetic to a little less pathetic, just
yeah, baby steps.
Baby steps.
So let's talk a little bit about the design then of all this. Obviously you went into a little bit how the background was, but what is there anything that really set, we've seen like ocean builders and other companies out there that are doing some different seasteading projects. What is different about yours? I mean, theirs are smaller individual pods, ocean builders, for example. Say Seasteading Institute has a bunch of different organizations underneath them that are doing different things. What sets your guys apart from them?
Well, ours is definitely less sexy.
Yeah.
That's the selling point. You want something less sexy? No. What most seasteading groups are going with, and as far as we know, we're the only one that's actually trying to do what we're doing. They're trying to create seasteads close to shore, or inside a harbor where the waves aren't as big, and that is a much more desirable place to be. Except for one thing, you're within the jurisdiction of an existing country. Mm-hmm. You don't really have any freedom. You might be able to live under the radar. You might be able to get away with certain things. Pay off the local policemen so that they don't come by and harass you as much. But you really don't have freedom, and especially if you want to be big and you want to be part of the global market and you want to create a big company producing or advertising or whatever. You want to actually prosper, and where everyone knows what products and services you're offering. You don't want to be covert. You want to be out in the open, and you can't do that. The way the zones of the ocean work, according to the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. You have the territorial waters, the contiguous zone.
Oh, okay.
The territorial waters go out to 12 nautical miles. Contiguous zone is 24 nautical miles. And then the exclusive economic zone is 200 nautical miles. Everything from 12 miles out is called international waters, but it really isn't until you go out beyond 200 nautical miles. Because if you're within 200 nautical miles, the parent country still has authority to regulate all floating structures, which means they essentially still own you and they can control you. You're not subject to their laws, but you're subject to their regulations. So they can say, oh, well, we don't like what you're doing here. So because of this regulation, we're going to shut you down. So really, until you're outside that 200 nautical miles, and then when you're talking about 200 nautical miles out, that's like 230 miles. That's where the high seas are. That's where the waves can get roughed. That's where you're not just going to make a small little shipping boat that just, or some kind of little yacht that just kind of floats on the ocean. You need to be secure and solid and be able to survive the biggest storms that can happen at sea. That being said, as Joe Gruff points out in his Seasteading videos, there is a huge range of ocean violence. The waves range in some places to having a max wave height of maybe 5 meters to up in the North Sea, north of Europe, which has just broke the world record of 50 meters. And you can choose places that are much more gentle, depending on where you go.
Yeah, and when you start getting out that far too, you start running out of continental shelf, so you're getting in deeper water too. So you got no way of necessarily anchoring yourself if you wanted to as well. But I noticed on your website you were talking about having a man-made island on that one design. So how does that all play into?
Well, there are a bunch of sea mounts. It's interesting. You're out in the middle of the ocean where, the water is, 5 kilometers deep. And yet out in the middle of nowhere, there's this huge Mount Everest coming up out of nowhere, but it doesn't hit the surface. Mm-hmm. It comes to like 50 meters short of the surface, or 20 meters. And you can go out there in the middle of this ocean. You look down, you're like, oh, look, there are plants down there. Oh, look, there's a whole forest down there, and there's fish down there, So I mean, it's within arm's reach, but it didn't break the surface, which means it doesn't count as an actual island.
Right.
But we anchored to that.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about that before. So, I mean, that's a really interesting aspect because, yeah, when you're like me and you're not as educated in this stuff, you think the further out you go, the deeper it is, and just there is no, I guess there's no irregularities. It's all just, the further you go, the deeper it goes, and then you get closer to land, it goes back up. There is no, possibility of it being, I guess, different in the middle of it. So, I mean, that's that's something that I guess I've never thought of even with our project.
On freedomhaven.org, we have a map that shows all the locations around the world that are below sea level until about 2.5 kilometers deep. Bathymetric maps. Instead of topography, it's bathymetric. And anything that's less than 2.5 kilometers deep is theoretically something you can anchor to. The Perdido oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico was anchored at 2.5 kilometers above the ocean surface, ocean seabed. So it can be done. It's expensive, and it's better if it's much closer, but there are a lot of options out there.
So for anchoring it, that would not be a permanent solution, correct? That's just, or is that the intended to permanently be anchored to a seamount or something?
Well, ideally, if everything goes well, we take one of those seamounts and build it up into an actual island. Okay. And if we actually build it into an actual island, like above water, and we get the Montevideo Convention, you need to have a permanent population. You need to have territory. You need to be able to enter into correspondence with other countries. I forgot what the fourth one was, but it's also on freedomhaven.org. And if we comply with all these, technically, according to law, we'll be a state. The advantage of being an actual state isn't because, we want to be a country and have power. It's quite the opposite. It's the fact that once we have a state, we have our own 12 miles of territorial waters around it, which means all the vessels that are in that 12 miles zone. I mean, it isn't about the island. The island's going to be this tiny little thing that may have a population of 10 people. Right. And I'm sure the property value on that would be very expensive. No one's going to want to live on the island. They're going to want to live on the ocean around the island. But once you have that as a place that like the UN or International Maritime Organization they recognize your flag, and you have that 12 miles around it, that means that you don't have other countries coming in and harassing your people. You're going, legally speaking, they need to leave you alone, and that gives you the greater freedom.
Fascinating.
That'd be kind of cool, because then you could actually join the UN meetings and everything like that. You could go and be the representative of your island and just, put yourself up there with the rest of the guys.
Yeah, we've heard great tales of your corruption from lands far away.
Yeah. I'm sure you'd be right in line trying to join the UN after all that. So how big is this thing?
Big. Let's just get really technical here. It's big.
Yeah.
No, it's about one barge is about 2 football fields in length and about 52 meters high, or 160 feet, 150 feet high. So it's if you have you ever seen one of those actual mega container ships before?
Not in person.
The new one.
Actually, yes, I have. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Have you seen also like one of the huge cruise ships that come in?
That I have not seen.
Okay. The mega container ships are the biggest out there. Well, except for there's some structures that are bigger, and they would be even bigger than that if it wasn't for the fact that the Panama Canal has a size limitation.
Right.
So they're the biggest. I think it's 60 meters across, 400 meters long, and about 50 or so meters high. This would be essentially the same dimensions as one of those, except that it's going to be half of them, because each barge is essentially going to be like half a mega container ship, a little bit shorter than that, and it's built around these 3 septic tanks that are in the center of it, and everything flows into that, and everything's kind of built out from there according to the shipping containers and so forth. So it ended up being about 156 times 3, 160 some odd meters long instead of 200 meters long. So it's a little bit shorter than half of it.
So is there a reason why you went so big?
Stability.
Okay.
As you get bigger, the waves get smaller. That's pretty much all. Because if it wasn't for the waves, I would much rather have myself one of those beautiful, sexy-looking pillars with a little house on it out in the middle of nowhere. Because that is definitely much more attractive, and you have all this space around you, the water and stuff. One advantage, though, of having it this big is that means if you actually want to go shopping or you want to go to work, or want to go wherever it is, you're not climbing down a ladder, getting onto a boat, someone else getting on a boat. You're just walking down the street like you would anywhere else, except that it would be actually closer. It'd be like being on an aircraft carrier, where you have the stores and except that you have a lot more of that. You'd have a huge selection, a huge variety, and lots of diversity, and lots of competition.
Right, and I wouldn't sell yourself short, because myself, I like the industrial look of architecture and stuff along those lines too. So I'm all for that too. As much as I love how sexy those Ocean Builder Sea Pods are, I do really appreciate a nice architectural design too. So
utilitarian is its own kind of.
It is.
Well, and when you look at it from a cost standpoint too, I mean, the less that you're putting in the cosmetic side of it, the stuff that doesn't necessarily make or break it really. I mean, you're saving yourself the money, and you're making it to be a more affordable project as well.
Basically, the structure is big enough that if the way the waves, the way rogue waves work, the rogue waves are the largest waves of the ocean that destroy ships. You have a storm where the waves are between 10 or 20 meters deep, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you have one wave that's 50 meters deep. And it happens from a couple different reasons, and one of them is just randomly the energies happen to coalesce, and so they combine together to form a very huge wave that's like 3 times as big as the ones around them. The world record is 50 meters. If one of those waves hits the structure we're designing, and by the way, the country's called Freedomhaven, the structure is called New Liberty. If one of those waves hits New Liberty, because essentially every structure will be its own government in a sense. You have this country, and you have every boat, ship will be its own state, so to speak, living within the Constitution, the umbrella of the Constitution. But if one of those waves hits New Liberty, the wave won't even wash up on deck. It's taller than that wave. So that's one of the advantages of being big. Also, you have we discussed in our group about what kind of minimum population would you need to be able to have a flourishing, a growing marketplace. And they decided about 10,000 people. So we're shooting for an initial population of about 10,000 people. If you have too much less than that, yeah, do people survive? Yeah, you can build a couple of knickknacks here and there, but you really don't have, you have like one store you can go to. You don't have 15 different stores or different restaurants. And, you know, like I live in Keokuk, it's a population of 10,000 people, and we have, you know, a dozen different grocery stores you can go to. We have, you know, 20 different restaurants you can go to. And you're going to have variety even greater than that, I imagine, in New Liberty.
So I lost my train of thought there where I was going with this. Man, you got something, Adam? Well, I'm thinking about where I'm at.
So, I'm just, I'm just fascinated by it because, you know, with what Brendan and I've, you know, well, Brendan obviously has been doing this way longer, and I kind of joined his project about a year ago. So everything's like pretty new to me, but everything like, you know, I've looked at and that he's showed me has all been, you know, the smaller things and the compact things, and is like, you know, it's cool that you're working on a structure that, you know, takes the compact living in a sense, but turns it into a structure that is, I mean, feasible to withstand like what you're talking about with the rogue waves and just the elements in nature that could be detrimental to, kind of like whatever, you know, other people are building, you know, because like you said, if everything's smaller, it's not going to be able to withstand some of this stuff depending on where it's at. So it's a cool project outside looking in, because yeah, like we're used to seeing the small things, and what you're doing, yeah, it's big, it's ambitious, but it's also practical too.
We hope so. One other thing to think about, it's possible to have small little enclosed pods that kind of float with the waves of the sea, and the wave doesn't cause any damage. It kind of just bobs around, you know, and that works. The problem is if you have like a cluster of these, then they're being thrown as projectile against each other. One video I saw online talked about why this seasoned boatsman, he and his wife don't actually anchor when storms come. They don't anchor inside the harbor at the mooring buoys like all the other boats do. They anchor farther out at sea, or still in the harbor, but farther away from that whole group on their own anchor. And they said, well, why don't you use the buoys? And he said, because every time one of these storms happen, someone's boat breaks free from the mooring and becomes a projectile that is destroying the other boats in its path. And every storm happens, that happens. So that's one advantage of having one solid unit as opposed to a bunch of little small units, because the wave, it's like a tornado. You know, a tornado wouldn't do you any damage if it wasn't for all the projectiles that is throwing around.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Not trying to change the vibe too much here, but so we're talking about basically a floating city here of 10,000 people. Obviously, you guys, well, maybe I'm wrong here too. Maybe you are thinking of every single aspect, as far as obviously you're looking at, you know, sanitation and all, and that's one of the biggest questions is, where does the poop go? You know, that's the other question that comes up every time. So what are you guys doing about that?
We're designing, essentially the ship is designed around 3 large septic tanks. And the septic tanks themselves, instead of being the traditional septic tank where it's shallow and wide, these septic tanks are tall and narrow. And the reason for that is because if the ship ever does switch, the purpose of a septic tank is to allow the floaties to float to the top and the heavy stuff to float to the bottom, which means you don't want to constantly shake it up. You want it to be peaceful and calm. If you have a tall glass of water and you shake it from side to side, it does move a little bit, but not as much as if you take a pie pan and move it to side with water in it. So you want to have a septic tank tall and thin. At least that's what we're going to be. That's a theory, and that's what we're building around. And in this big tank, there are basically 4 quadrants. So you fill up one quadrant until the septic tank eventually gets full, and you need to pump it out. But before you do that, you let it sit and switch to the second quadrant, and wait until that gets full, and they switch to the third one, and then they switch to the fourth one, and when the fourth one's full, hopefully it's been like a month or so, and the first one has had chance to ferment and decompose to the point that everything that's left there is essentially just, it's what they call it, sludge, but it's something that you could essentially release it into the ocean. It would sink to the bottom and become the soil of tomorrow. Everything that's had a chance to decompose, and it isn't just releasing raw sewage, it's something that's decomposed all the way. And then you basically just keep cycling it through the 4 quadrants continuously, and just dump out the one that has been sitting there for a month. It's been aged. And just keep moving on. That's what we have for the septic tank.
Interesting. And so what's your, going more on design here, how do you plan on power and everything?
We're, for the most part, because this is our goal is to have a free market, the freest country in the world, with the greatest economic and social freedoms. Essentially, if you aren't threatening to murder someone, aren't threatening to kidnap them or steal or break their stuff, have at it. Enjoy yourself. Have a nice day. So there's going to be all kinds of competing services to offer anything and everything people want. We're not actually planning to offer anything for energy, but if we get closer to the date and there aren't at least a dozen different, or at least one different companies out there wanting to offer electricity, power, gas, groceries, whatever it is. I mean, and we built the structure around having imports and exports. We have containers that come in and go out, so you're constantly having a flow of stuff you're sending out and stuff that you're receiving. So shipping is going to be integral to the whole operation. Is we're going to have a very active shipping industry going on here. But all the services and products that people want, if there aren't people planning to provide it from day one, I'll jump in the mix and I'll offer to sell it. I mean, I imagine I won't be able to do as good a job as someone who's done this their entire life. It'll probably be terrible quality and higher cost. And then someone else will come along and they'll compete with me and do a much better job and then put me out of business, a week into my starting my company, which is good because that means all the prices are going to go down, the quality's go up, and it's a free market, and I love it.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to my other point, where you guys aren't really trying to answer every problem there because it's a free market. You're allowing other businesses and stuff like that. So what is the business model, I guess? What is your business model then?
The business model is we are basically renting space. There are some places where they say, well, we're going to sell you this space. But if you're talking about a floating structure, there is a lifespan to that structure. You can't buy something and 150 years from now expect it it's still going to be there. Steel rusts, and at some point, all steel will succumb to the ocean. This is something new. We feel that the most we can promise is 5 years. We don't know what's going to happen after 5 years. We hope that it lasts for 50 years or 100 years, and we build the structure to last for a long time, but we're only going to guarantee for 5 years. So what you're basically doing is this, we call a 5-year lease on a 20-foot equivalent unit. And you're basically buying for it ahead of time. And that payment, that 5-year payment was paid all in advance. And that's the money we're going to use to actually build the structure and everything we need to actually make this project work. So everyone is paying in advance for their little piece of Freedomhaven that they're going to be living in. And then once they pay for it, they have it for 5 years. And we'll be providing for septic and forced air, and that's pretty much all that's included in the lease. Everything else will be provided by the free market, which means you can choose not to have any electricity and you just sit there in the dark because you're happy with that. That's fine. Or you want to have a huge gaming system and tons of computers, and you and your friends come over and you have like 20 people crammed into this thing with monitors everywhere, and you're playing Quake all day long. That works too, whatever you want to do.
So power, so does the water and everything like that fall under that same plan as the free market, or are you guys as well?
Yeah,
okay.
All that. We have lots of solutions for water, and lots of solutions. Even we discussed which services and products do we think would require more space than one shipping container, because those are the ones you really have to plan for. Because anything that can fit, including electricity, that can fit inside one shipping container, you want, General Electric wants to come by and sell you electricity, right? So they have their shipping container. They come in and they have another one next door that has all the gas and fuel and stuff. They are ready to go, offering 50 megawatts of electricity from day one. Which of those services could not fit in that? And we went through like open air parks, swimming pools, a list of things like that. And New Liberty is planning to offer, at least initially, all of those bigger ones. We're going to have lots of open air you can walk into, like a whole mile long path you can walk on the outside, not to mention miles of corridors inside. We're going to have a park, swimming pool. I mean, that's going to be easy. People can just enclose water in the ocean. And if you don't want salt water, you want freshwater pool, then you just enclose it in some kind of plastic or something. You basically have a bag out there, and you have the desalinated water on the inside and the salinate on the outside, and you have yourself a pool. There's lots of solutions like that.
Yeah, very cool.
Free water also ranges from people who want to buy imported water to desalination through electrolysis or pressure osmosis. I don't think I'm saying that right. Where they force it through these filters. They get rid of the salt that way. There's probably a lot of different solutions and competitors. Unlike where you live right now, where you can choose from monopoly of water A or nothing, you're probably going to have, I would guess, at least 3 different people you can choose who you want to buy water from. This company may be cheaper, but the water tastes a little funny, even though it's safe. This one over here, it's recycled and it's not really meant for drinking. Or this one is pristine, Perrier kind of water. And there's going to be a variety, and you can choose what you want.
So you say that it sounds. Well, I'm thinking, I'm certain engineer brain going here, trying to think about this. Of how much? Well, I'm thinking how much of a headache that would be though if you've got 50 different suppliers as far as the pipe, the plumbing and stuff along those. Like, unless each container is individually plumbed, and then can be connected to whoever at that point. I guess. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, we have a utility. What we're thinking is on the shipping container, since shipping containers will be next to each other, on the shipping container, one side, the door won't open. Basically, you're going to have one side for the door open, and the second side will have a utilities shaft that will go up and down the length of it, and all the electricity, power, everything else. And the hookups to the containers will be similar to at an RV park when you drive in your RV and you hook up the septic and water and all that stuff, and you plug it in and you're good. It'd be something similar to that. You have a new container come, so snap, click, and within 5 minutes you're all plugged in and you're ready to
go. Yeah. Very cool. So, that being said, where are we at with all this?
Well, not where we want to be, obviously. We're 3 years into it, and we obviously initially when we first started talking about fantasize, wouldn't it be great to have this whole thing done in 3 years? Well, we're not there yet. What we're doing right now is we're in phase 1 where we're creating a 1/500 scale model that I'll be 3D printing downstairs, and we're doing some tests and videos and show how it handles on the water with the weights and stuff, everything accurate, and also how they snap together. And it'll be a model that we'll be sharing on the internet, so everyone can, the 3D printer can print out their own and take a look at it and make suggestions. Like, for example, the one suggestion that came up with the stairs is on one side, we had the staircases, and it's the OSHA 32.5 degree angle that's perfect for human beings, whatever. But on the other side, they were saying have the angle be much shallower and have it be for cars. Not cars, but like forklifts and stuff. So you can have businesses and industries shuttle stuff back and forth to each other. So that's something we're considering as well. So on one side, you have staircases, and the other side, you have basically much more shallow roads, in essence. So you can have wheeled vehicles going back and forth. But we're in the process of making the 1/500 scale model. I'm finishing up the design right now, and hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have the design completed, and then I'll be 3D printing it, and we can actually do some tests. The next step after that is creating the 1/100th scale model, and it's actually technically 1/87th scale model. And that is a scale for your small model trains, the most common scale out there in the world. And we chose that scale because then you can use all the different kinds of fun stuff to put in there, and you can get little people and stuff, whatever. And that model we hope to have completed and bring it with us to fMRIAL 2021. Now, from that model going upward, that's when everything starts to become paid. The 20-foot equivalent units, 1 TEU, we're estimating would cost about $50,505. That's an estimate, but the idea is that there's 4 phases. Phase 1, we're doing out of pocket. I'm doing that right now. Phase 2 is R&D, research and development, where everyone who's getting a TEU puts $5 towards making the 1/87 scale model, which would be the size of a van. And we're going to try to make that out of actual steel, which means it'd be very, very thin. So you have some child that puts their hand in it and they can actually break the model, because at that scale, you're a giant. So you have to be careful with it. But it would actually show how the thing would really stand up under those waves. And then the next step would be make a 1/10th scale model. And that's with everyone putting in $500 towards making this huge, the size of my house, $2 million model that would actually be in a harbor somewhere. And at each scale, you're taking it to a more violent marine environment, so the waves get bigger, and so you can actually see how it works, and you learn at each level. And then the final one, you make a 1/1 scale, you'd have probably someplace like Samsung Heavy Industries of South Korea. They've been making the best quality boats at the cheapest price. Love them, free market. And we probably have them built there. And that's when the final one is. And that's where our estimates come from. Our estimates for how much we think this would cost is based on how much the recent mega container ships have cost. The OOCL Hong Kong, which is actually already old because it's 2 years old, was like $180 million. We won't have the engine they have. We won't have a lot of the features they have, but we will have some other ones that, for example, have a gantry crane and other couple of features. So we're assuming that per area, we're going to be about the same cost as they are, but it's still kind of an estimate at this point. That's kind of where this whole cost estimates are kind of based on.
So, once again, I think you're taking a very interesting approach with how you're funding it too. So I'm assuming that you got very active following and fan base right now. If you're pretty confident of how that's going to play out, of your 300 and some on your Facebook group, are you saying most of those are pretty well engaged in it?
Actually, no. Okay. The majority of them, just joined it because it was interesting. They checked out once in a while and communicate. There's only like maybe 10% of them that are actively engaged all the time. And this isn't the group that I discuss these with. I tell them that we're not trying to sell it to them.
Right.
If they buy it, that's great.
Yeah.
Why we want them there is not because they're our future customers, but instead we share knowledge and information. We all want this to happen. So we have some people who've lived on boats for many years of their life. Other people who've worked on oil rigs. We have other people who've worked with concrete and steel. We have different experiences, and it's what they bring to the table knowledge-wise to help point out where we're being idiotic. Like, for example, the first designs we made three years ago are laughable. We still keep them up on our site, and we have the data on them. So so we're completely open on how idiotic we were from the beginning, that we've made so much progress, and it keeps getting better and better, which is why it's so fun when we talk to people about it, because they say, well, have you thought about this? It's like, well, open up to chapter 12. Have you thought about this? Well, open up to chapter 14. I mean, we've been for 3 years, we've been studying and exploring and going through various levels of mistakes until we've come up with the design we're at right now. And this design may not even be the final design. As we learn, constantly growing.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you start putting the thing in the water, I'm sure you'll learn 1,000 different things you didn't even think about.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I get that, but yeah, it's still exciting.
Yes.
That's kind of been our path too. Is that the more we talk with people, the more people ask us questions. Either we have an answer for it, or it's like, oh wait, maybe we didn't think about that. And then it's something that you have to kind of work into it. And I keep saying we. This is all like Brendan's idea. I'm just here to help him with some of the podcast stuff. But I mean, but yeah, it's kind of been like that because you know, just like I said, even with like the social media, people would ask questions of like, oh, how does this work? Well, how do you plan on doing this? How do you plan on doing this? And either you have an answer or you figure one out, and I mean, then it only makes your product even better.
And we found that the hecklers, the people who say this is impossible, there's no possible way this can work, are actually the ones that provide the best information. Because as they come out and says, well, it wouldn't work because of this. We're like, okay, we've done this. We didn't think about this. That's a good point. And so we changed the design, and now we thought about this, you know. And we just keep, you know, keeps evolving, and it's just, it's a lot of fun. So basically, the how we're going to get to we're going to have 4,000 TEUs that will pay for the initial project, and we can always have more than that. That's the minimum to make the project to get the initial V-shaped design that would be able to face into the wind and is moored so that no matter where the flow of the water comes from, it's always facing into the wind, even when there's no power. 4,000 is a lot of people. Having 4,000 people who are, well, first of all, 4,000 people being willing to commit $5 for each container they're planning to buy, and someone wants to buy 10 containers, so they put $50 in, you know, whatever it is, that will be much easier. Then the next step would be $500 for each step. And you have to do each of the R&D levels before you can pay for the final one, which means if people want to come in later on, they're still going to pay for the 5 plus 500, and we're going to use that for whatever R&D we're doing at that point. So you can't say, well, I'm just going to come in later on and we'll just skip the R&D. R&D is part of the payment. But when you're paying for the $5, all you're paying for is the creation of that model. And the $500 is the creation of that model, which means you can come and visit it, you can explore, you can ask questions about it. You know, it's the creation of that model, and that's all you're paying for. You know, so if it turns out that that iron disappeared after making the 1/10 scale model, the U.S. government says, "Oh wow, this guy's going to be offering freedom, and we don't like that." You know, so suddenly I'm gone. Someone else can run with it because everything we have is out there in the open. It's public. The model is still there, and they just continue with the next step, and it lives on.
I have to say, I'm always a fan that like the majority of our guests that we have on our podcasts are very libertarian, and that's always been fun for me. So we try to stay non-political because you never know who sides with what, but that seems to be about 90% of our guests, and that's kind of where we are too. So it's always fun to, like, for me at least, to hear the freedom the freedom side of all of it.
Yes.
So
and our hopes are actually that we have a plan down that is so, like cryptocurrency. The government hasn't taken action against cryptocurrency much because they know they really can't do anything to stop it. As soon as they know they can actually stop it, that's when they'll be taking action. But they haven't. They've kind of sidelines. If we can put down a plan that's so bulletproof, hopefully I won't be disappeared. And that's the plan. I'd like to be around for a while. And if we can think of all these scenarios, which is why that role-playing group is so good. You know, how could our project be destroyed by a controlling government or bureaucrat that wants to stop us, you know?
Yeah. Fortunately, if you get this thing going, like I've always said, my whole goal ultimately is to build the thing and then disappear and fake my death. So, you know, you can always do that too. So I guess to people listening to this, like, what do you need at this point in time?
At this point, knowledge, information, feedback, visit our page, read our Constitution. What are we missing? Tell us, punch holes in it. Tell us what we're doing wrong. In about 2 months, hopefully, when we finish phase 1, the model, we have something we can actually do. We're ready for the $5 from each of the 4,000 TEUs. Then at that point, what we'll be asking for is $5 for each TEU that you plan to do. If you're having 1 TEU, like if you're wanting 5 TEUs, and that's $25, whatever it is, and we're actually going to probably have a Kickstarter campaign somewhere where the minimum thing is going to be $20,000, $5 a piece, and we would track who all paid into how much, whatever it was, and we would build it and then have it built before next summer so we could bring it to ephemeral. After we build that one, and we have some there, we're gonna get a lot of press. Then we will probably be engaging Samsung Heavy Industries or whichever location is the best deal at that point, because things change, and ask them if they would be interested in maybe making the 1/10 scale model and the full scale model for us, and start engaging them going forward. One tricky thing with all this is that we can't, when we go to the $2 million and then the $200 million levels of the full scale model, you can't just take that money and put it in a bank account somewhere, because the U.S. government has full control over all the banks in the world. And if they want to, they can just, I mean, I've seen it. There's a checkbox they can check, and basically they remove all the funds, they freeze the accounts, and there's nothing you can do about it. So as soon as you put all that money in one location, it can be taken away. So we need to find some way to transfer from all the people paying into it straight towards whatever company is receiving the funds for that part. So we never actually see the money. It's going straight, and we keep track of all, we get a receipt for every single one of those checks. So at the final one, the $50,000, one person will send a $50,000 check straight to Samsung Heavy Industries, and they confirm that they got this $50,000 check, this $50,000 check from these different people. We check it off and know how much they have, but this one's going toward buying a tugboat. This one's going towards, all the different things we'll be paying for. So we never actually see the money, and therefore it can never be stolen from us,
Yeah. Okay. So obviously we've got your website, freedomhaven.org. Where else should people be reaching out to try to get a hold of you or to see what you're doing?
Facebook. Go to our Facebook groups. The page itself is just a static page. It's much less interesting than our Facebook groups, where we have live discussions, images, and our semi-weekly Zoom calls. You can go onto our Facebook groups and find it there as well, and just join the discussion.
Is there
awesome?
Is there anything else that obviously there's so much we could talk about here. We could fill another whole hour discussing this stuff. But is there anything that we haven't covered that either you think is really cool, people should know about, or you want to dive a little bit more into?
It's all about finding a location where there's no government, finding a platform where you're stable even when storms are bad, and having the right kind of political platform, a government that you're building off of. Most people look at what I have set out in the Constitution and call it an anarchy. I disagree with them on a technicality, because anarchy to me means no government, and there very much is a government there. I mean, if you murder someone, kidnap someone, or steal from someone, you will be stopped, if not made dead by the person who you're stealing from. But the Constitution is probably going to be a very, very tricky. The design, you can see, you can test it, but how to foresee that you set it up well so that it doesn't turn into a tyranny 10, 20, 30, 100 years on the road. The United States handled the Constitution, U.S. Constitution has helped the United States resist that for 200 years, but we've still been slowly heading down that road more and more. How can we have our Constitution do even better? Yeah. So people want to read that, look through it, and try to help us see where we made mistakes and what we're missing. That'd be great.
Very cool.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't talk over you. I keep doing that. So you gave us so you said we can catch you on your website, freedomhaven.org, and you're on Facebook. So we encourage all of our viewers and listeners to go check that out. Catch up with Tony Olsen on those platforms, get in touch with him, check out his project. With this, right now as we're recording, we don't have the pictures, but as Brendan edits it, we'll have a lot of those visuals throughout this thing.
So they will be here when you watch it.
Well, so they already know that.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I'm even saying that, because it's been way too long since we've done this podcast. So now I'm all out of it. So once again, thank you for, taking time to join us, Tony. And, we're going to be keeping an eye on your project, and we wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Definitely. Appreciate your time, man. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our first patron, Edward. Thank you very much for your support. As a patron, you get perks such as early access to the podcasts and other videos. Plus, we'll have polls from time to time that you get to take part of. So we encourage you to hop over there for as low as $1 a month and support us on that.
Thank you guys for tuning in again to another episode of Colonize the Ocean podcast. As always, you can check us out on our social media platforms. You can see us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Library, YouTube, Reddit. All you got to do is look for Atlantis Sea Colony and you'll find us. Also, if you're able to donate to help us support our project, go to www.patreon.com/Atlantis Sea Colony. For any other info and the links to all those, you can go to www.atlantisseacolony.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode.